There's a moment that keeps happening in offices around the world, and it looks almost identical every time. Someone stares at a glowing monitor, watching a task they used to spend hours on finish itself in seconds. The soft whir of a cooling fan the only sound in the room. That person isn't celebrating. They're wondering what happens next. If you've felt that creeping uncertainty about AI automation, you're not imagining things. The shift is accelerating faster than most predictions even 2 years ago suggested, and the usual reassurances feel hollow. But here's the thing. The real story isn't the one you're being sold by either the panic merchants or the hype machines. The mechanism is different from what you've been told, and understanding it changes everything about how you prepare. This isn't financial advice or a crystal ball. It's about potential trends and what they actually mean for people trying to build something sustainable. Stick around, because the conventional wisdom about machines eliminating jobs misses how displacement actually works. Let's start with what everyone gets wrong. The headlines love to frame this as a replacement story. Robots in, humans out, like swapping batteries in a flashlight. Picture a factory floor at night, conveyor belts humming under fluorescent lights, not a single person in sight. That image is powerful, but it's also misleading. AI automation doesn't work like a light switch. It works more like water gradually carving through limestone. Slowly, unevenly, creating new channels while leaving some rock untouched for decades. The displacement happens in pockets, often in tasks rather than whole roles, and usually in ways that are invisible until you look closely. Consider customer service. A few years ago, the prediction was that chatbots would eliminate call centers entirely. Fast forward to now, and what actually happened? Some positions did vanish, but many transformed into something different. Humans handling the complex, emotional, or edge case situations that systems still fumble. The workers who adapted learned to collaborate with the technology instead of competing against it. This pattern shows up everywhere if you know where to look. It's not replacement, it's redistribution. So why does this matter for you specifically? Because understanding the actual mechanism changes how you prepare. If you're bracing for a tsunami that wipes everything clean, you'll make different choices than if you're preparing for a river that's slowly changing course. The second option is closer to reality, and it's actually more actionable. If you're finding this useful, consider subscribing. This channel digs into these kinds of nuanced shifts without the hype or the doom. Here's a flip side worth sitting with. Some people hear this and feel relieved. They think, okay, so my position is probably safe for a while, I can relax. But that comfort might be the bigger risk. The workers who got blindsided weren't the ones in obviously automatable roles. They were the ones who assumed their particular niche was immune. Think about radiologists a decade ago. Reading medical scans seemed like peak human expertise, the kind of pattern recognition that would take machines forever to match. Today, AI automation systems can flag certain anomalies faster and sometimes more accurately than trained specialists. A notification pinging on a tablet propped against a cold steel desk in a dim reading room. The radiologists who thrived didn't fight the technology. They learned to use it as a first pass, freeing themselves for deeper analysis and patient communication. If you want to dig deeper into how these transitions actually unfold, public research databases have years of labor market studies tracking exactly these patterns. The data is drier than the headlines, but far more useful. Now let's talk about the part that rarely gets discussed honestly, what automated systems actually can't do, at least not yet. Picture someone debugging a failing workflow at 2 in the morning. Coffee rings staining a notebook full of scribbled diagrams, the glow of error messages reflecting off their glasses. That person isn't doing the automated task. They're doing something harder. They're figuring out why the automation broke, what edge case it missed, and how to teach it to handle situations it's never seen. This is the new scarcity. The bottleneck shifts from doing to deciding. When a system can handle 1,000 routine tasks, the value moves to whoever can identify which tasks should be automated, spot when the automation fails, and judge whether the output is actually correct. These skills require understanding both the technology and the domain it's operating in. This is where a moral tension emerges that we need to name. If the value shifts to supervision and judgment, what happens to the people whose entire career was built on doing routine tasks well? They often have deep domain knowledge but may lack the technical fluency to redirect that expertise. There's no clean answer here. Some will adapt, some will struggle. The honest take is that AI automation creates real winners and real losers, and pretending otherwise helps no one. Let's get practical. What does preparing for this actually look like? First, stop thinking about job security and start thinking about task evolution. Open a blank document on your laptop, the cursor blinking in an empty white field, and list every repeatable task in your current role. Now ask, which of these could a well-trained system handle if given enough examples? The tasks that remain after that exercise are your leverage points. Double down on them. Second, build what I call translation fluency. You don't need to become a machine learning engineer, but you do need to understand how to communicate with people who build these systems and how to evaluate whether an automated output is trustworthy. Imagine sitting in a meeting room with glass walls, sunlight streaming across a polished table, explaining to a technical team exactly what edge cases your customers hit. That translation ability is becoming one of the most valuable and undersupplied skills in the market. Third, document your institutional knowledge before you're asked. The people who become irreplaceable during automation waves are often the ones who can articulate the unwritten rules, the exceptions, and the judgment calls that never made it into any official process. That knowledge is exactly what systems need to be trained on, and the people who hold it become guides rather than casualties. Here's another flip side moment. Some folks will hear this advice and think it's just about protecting yourself, playing defense. But there's an offensive angle too. The same dynamics that make some roles vulnerable create entirely new categories of work. Someone has to audit outputs for bias. Someone has to design the human touch points in automated customer journeys. Someone has to train these systems on the messy reality of how work actually gets done. Standing in front of a whiteboard covered in sticky notes, mapping exceptions that no algorithm would ever anticipate. These roles barely existed 5 years ago. They're growing faster than almost any traditional category now. The people landing these opportunities share a common trait. They stopped viewing AI automation as a threat to outrun and started viewing it as a current to navigate. Look, the fear is understandable. When you watch a system produce in minutes what used to take you days, it's hard not to feel a cold knot in your stomach. A cursor blinking on a finished report you didn't write, rain tapping against the window behind your desk. But fear without understanding leads to paralysis. And paralysis is the real career killer in a shifting landscape. The workers who thrive in the next decade won't be the ones who can type fastest or remember the most procedures. They'll be the ones who can ask better questions, catch subtle errors, and bring judgment to situations where the right answer isn't obvious. Those are deeply human capacities. They're also skills you can develop right now, today, with intentionality. This brings us to the core insight that ties everything together. AI automation changes what counts as valuable work, and that shift happens unevenly, unpredictably, and with much more room for human agency than the apocalyptic narratives suggest. The future belongs to the people who can decide what the systems should be doing, verify whether it was done well, and handle the situations where judgment, empathy, or creativity are required. So here's your takeaway. Start auditing your own work for automation vulnerability, not to panic, but to redirect. Build the translation fluency that makes you the bridge between systems and humans. Document the judgment calls and exceptions that live only in your head. Results depend entirely on your effort, your starting point, and how consistently you adapt. There are no guarantees, just better positioning. What's one task in your current work that you think no system could handle? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what you're seeing in your own field. If this helped clarify how AI automation affects jobs, subscribe for more analysis without the hype. See you in the next one.